I'm going to make a start. So good morning and welcome to the Safer Spaces, Safer Places learning event and briefing. My name is Becca Hewitt and I'm the chair of South Devon and Dartmoor Community Safety Partnership, and I'm going to be starting us off this morning. But I'm not presenting alone. This is going to be a team presentation. You're going to be hearing from quite a few of us involved in the project this morning. So I'm just going to ask everybody to introduce themselves, then I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing today and we'll make a start. So if I could just come to Emily, please.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Emily Sethi. I'm a development manager at Young Devon.
Brilliant.
You do.
Oh, yeah, it's all right. Brilliant. Thanks, Emily. If I could come to Duncan next, please.
Hi there, Duncan Cherrett. So I'm Head of Social Action Skills and Qualifications within Young Devon and oversee the contract management of this project and a range of projects across the county.
Brilliant. Thanks, Duncan. Charlotte, can I come to you, please?
Hi, I'm Charlotte Westake. I'm a youth work coordinator and I've been overseeing the peer researchers on this project.
Brilliant. Thanks, Charlotte. Steph?
Morning, everyone. My name's Steph Holwell. I'm a youth work manager for Space, and my role is to support the delivery staff on Space and the projects they're running for this.
Brilliant. Thanks, Steph. Brandon, can I come to you?
Hi there, I'm Brandon. I'm a senior youth support worker for Space, and I've been working with the young people taking part in this project.
Brilliant. Thanks, Brandon. Maddie?
Hi, I'm Maddie Barrow, Senior Youth Worker with Space based in Newton Abbot, and we've been working with young people building Teignmouth Youth Club.
Fantastic. Thanks, Maddie. And last but absolutely not least, Hannah.
Hi, I'm Hannah Delavery, peer researcher working on the Safer Spaces, Safer Places project with Young Devon.
Brilliant, thank you. So throughout the course of this morning, you're going to hear from all of those presenters bringing their different elements to today's session. You'll notice we're recording. We're recording because we are going to be having a link to this that we will be sending out next week. We will also be sending you the slides, so don't feel you need to scribble down the slides. And we'll also make sure that you've got contact details for each of us at the end if you'd like to ask anything more or find out anything more. So we've got quite a lot of content today, but it's not the whole program. We can't squeeze everything into just over an hour to allow some time for questions. So we're going to give you some examples of the work that we're doing. And hopefully we'll have some time for questions at the end. Please feel free to put any questions in the chat as we go along. We will try and answer them, but if there's anything that we can't answer, we will hold that to the end, and then we can discuss it at the end if it's not suitable to answer in the chat. The last thing I want to say before I get into the slides is we are going to be discussing some quite challenging topics this morning. So that's just a bit of a well-being warning, really, that we're going to be talking about harmful sexual behaviour and violence. So Duncan is going to be our slide magician today. He's our Chris Whitty. So Duncan, if you could please go on to the next slide. So I'm just going to start us off with the first couple of slides and let you know where this has come from. So back in June 2022, which feels like a lot longer ago than that, the CSP were approached by the one of the directors at Teignbridge Council around some money that the government had sent to each of the district councils called the UK Prosperity Fund. And we wanted to make sure that our allocation of that fund was spent in the best way possible. So I was asked if the CSP would be able to come up with a brief. So in 2 weeks, we came together, we brought together people that we were already working in partnership with on different projects, and we requested a total investment of 244,000, which is what we've been granted up to the end of March delivery. So one of the things that was really important to us was making sure that we brought those partners together to look at what was really needed in the community. The purpose of today is making sure that we don't do tea and medals at the end of the project. We want you to hear about our learning so far so that it can try and so that you can consider our learning to the work that you're doing, know about what you're doing, and we'll talk about the funding again at the end. But we will be doing stuff at the end of the project, but purposefully, we've still got a good 6 months to go, and we wanted to make sure that we were talking to you before we got to the end of the project. So our project title is Tackling Violence by Building Resilience in Our Communities. It has very much got a focus on young people and women and girls, and that is a result of the needs assessments that have been produced through the Safer Devon Partnership, and that's where that focus has come from. It is data-led. Next slide, please, Duncan. So the context, as I've mentioned, is partnership. We are very proud in South Devon of our partnership working, and we've been working alongside Space, Young Devon, and with police for a long time. And this project is continuing that really valuable partnership. We couldn't have pulled that brief together in 2 weeks if we weren't already working together really effectively, and we didn't have that data. So as I mentioned, we used data, but we also used information that had been gathered from our communities by those two organisations, Space and Young Devon, to focus our work, and that focus was on violence against women and girls. So we split that work and how we might respond to that based into two projects which you're going to hear about today. The first one of those is around making sure that we keep young people at the heart of our communities. We don't shove them out of our communities. We keep them in the heart of our communities, and we embrace them and make sure that they are valued and feel valued members of the community. The second one of those is around really tackling what we were seeing as a challenging culture of misogyny, which that was also having an impact on how our young people felt in our communities and how our communities were feeling against young people, and resulting in the behaviour that we were trying to mitigate and move away from. So enough from me for the moment. I'm now going to hand it over to Emily.
Thank you, Rebecca. So to give an idea of the full breadth and depth of the activities and the intentions that we've had within the Safer Spaces, Safer Places piece of work, this just shows, and on a scale in terms of all the different activities that we've been doing over the last couple of years. So right at the bottom there is the Safer Town for whole community with young people at its heart. And some of the activities within that has been peer research, environmental audits, and also social action projects. We've been delivering something called Let's Talk that Rebecca will tell us a little bit more about. And that takes us on to the next level of change that we've been trying to create, where young people feel safer and more able to affect change in their places. We've been doing specialist harmful sexual behaviour training. We've had various different areas within the piece of work that have been around kind of voice and creating space for young people to lead and be with us on this project. The next level of the project is around safety and interpersonal relationships. We've been delivering targeted work with young people and also group work in schools. And really kind of at the top of this pyramid here, we've been aiming to reduce harm and violence based on gender. And part of the way we've been doing that creatively is through some theatre productions in school. So this is just to give you a bit of an idea of the whole changes we've been trying to make across the place at the different levels, and with some of the activities that you're going to hear about in the rest of the presentation. So can I go to the next slide, please, Duncan? So what we really wanted to spend the majority of this presentation talking to you about is our key learning, what we've really heard, what we've done, and what we've taken out of the activities we've delivered so far. So to start that off, in terms of our learning, if I can have the next slide, Duncan. Right at the forefront, as Rebecca mentioned in the introduction, this work has been really important to us that it was with young people, but also led by young people. So we've had young people leading the work in terms of on our board, leading the design, leading the creation, the agenda, right from the offset, right from the beginning, leading the work, but also lots of spaces, lots of diverse, interesting, flexible spaces where we can really hear from young people and then act on that and help sort of advocate for that voice to be making some of the changes that they want to see in their communities. So really working with the people that this matters most to and supporting them to make the change that they want to see in their communities. So at the bottom here is a vision that we've been working towards, a vision of a place where young people trust and feel safe with their peers within their community, as well as empowered to challenge each other and act. And a little bit more on that later. I'm just going to hand over to Steph, who's going to talk a little bit more to you about our learning.
Hello again. So a key part of the success of this project hinges on the benefits of our partnership approach. As Becca said earlier, that as organisations, we've worked together on multiple projects, and there is a reason for that because it works well. So our partners bring their own expertise to the project. This is complemented by by each partner within the project, adding a wider range of skills and experience to the group. That means as we actively seek to complement each other's expertise rather than be competitive with each other, and that builds a better offer for communities, which is vital when you're trying to affect change. The sharing of resources and managerial time and budgets enhances the value of the project and the outcomes for communities and stakeholders. In an era where resources for communities are scarce, sharing these budgets and the management time allows for more of the money for the project to be spent on direct delivery, which is where we all want it spent. So it just creates better value and outcomes for the project. So our partnership has provided a wider network of a contact base and allows us to reach a wider section of the community to better affect change. So the wider we can reach out, the more young people we can touch with the project, the more young people we can affect change with, and a single agency just simply wouldn't do as well as the combined efforts of our partners. So our project has led to increased creativity and decision making, idea generation, and solution focused problem solving. So with different ways of thinking, coming together with different organizational approaches, we're better able to be creative, work towards more sustainable outcomes for communities in a way that affects greater change. So the benefits of partnership are greater change. That's the strap line here. Next slide, please. Unless actually any of our colleagues want to come in.
I was just going to mention from a kind of a point of view of sitting as part of the group and being involved in a range of partnerships over the years. What really enjoy with this one is that the collaborative approach. It feels like there's a real kind of equilibrium amongst the partners. There isn't quite the same sort of, sometimes you can get certain hierarchies within consortium partnerships, but the collaborative approach, the talking and sharing of ideas, the bringing of new relationships, of networks that we may not have. We realise that we're not specialists in every area, so bringing in our partners that may have the contact and the specialism and the knowledge in a certain point just really adds to the kind of the ability of what this project can do, and therefore that added value means that we're able to probably deliver far more and above what the level of the funding would normally be able to bring if it was a single entity. So that would be my kind of input into that one.
Any more on that one from colleagues? No.
It's also about people. Hopefully one of the reasons that we wanted so many people to be able to speak to you today is because the energy that you will feel hopefully coming through this presentation. There are some cracking people working on this project. Partnerships is also about people, and I'm really proud to be working and co-presenting with these guys. So thank you, Steph.
Next slide, please, Duncan.
That's a nice place to hand over. And leading forward from partnership, our partnership with young people, being led by young people, and the spaces that we've created. The spaces that were created for ideas, but also across the partnership as different agencies, also with young people, really committing to action, committing to that kind of feedback loop of what we've done and how we've done it. And so on to the next slide, Duncan. Across the project, we've had two big questions, two big research questions that we've been framing our work underneath. So the first one of these is, how do we make the whole community safer with young people at its heart? And we're going to hear from some of the people that have been delivering this work with young people to tell you a little bit more about their work. So and next slide, please, Duncan. And Rebecca, it's back to you.
Back to me for this one. So I just want to give you a bit of an introduction, and some of you who I've seen on the call are going to be bored to death with me talking about this, and I've heard this a number of times. So just literally 2 minutes. Let's Talk is a program that we are working on around outside of this project, but this project is contributing to, and we're making sure link in, because the linkages are what's really important. You heard earlier on about us wanting to make sure that the young people are safe in the whole community. We need a whole community response to that. So a big part of that community response for us is parents and carers and the role that they can play in supporting and safeguarding their young people. That's what Let's Talk is in a nutshell. You've got our aim at the top of that. We've delivered sessions that are targeted for different age groups and different specific needs of young people, again, that you can see on the slide. The data's gone up since I did this slide only a few days ago, and I think we're 40 shy now of 8,000 engagements with people. And watch this space, because our work at the moment is bringing a session specifically targeted and designed for dads and male carers. And we've got a consultation going on at the moment for men to give us their views on how we can engage with them and the things that matter to them around keeping their young people safe. The other thing that I just wanted to say before I finish on this slide is we have got really good response rates for the people that engage with us around the value of the Let's Talk sessions. And we've actually just having our first 3-month evaluations back, which are telling us that people are actually using the tips and techniques after the sessions as well. So enough from me on Let's Talk. I am really happy to bore any of you to death on this outside of the session, but that was just a bit of a flavour of it. So Duncan, next slide, please. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to do a kind of a switch sharing over to Charlotte, who's going to then share her screen. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
On mute, Charlotte.
There we go. So our aim was to create a focus group of young people who would like to make a difference by sharing their thoughts and on areas in Teignbridge that would, where they feel safe and unsafe, and we would do this by creating some online workshops and also some workshops in person. So we started by going into schools during lunch periods and also meeting with our housing team online. We used the space for young people to give us some feedback on different areas in Teignbridge. We had some areas already in mind due to an environmental audit that we did alongside the police. So we mapped out specific areas, and the young people were then able to share their experience of these places, but also give us an insight on some new places that we hadn't thought about. So just some of the feedback that we heard. So the specific areas that were mentioned as places of feeling unsafe, so like the multi-storey car park in Newton Abbot, the back beach in Teignmouth, and just the young people feeling unsafe walking around and travelling around Teignmouth and the impacts that can have on them. So reasons for feeling unsafe, so poor lighting, no CCTV, not being well kept. That was making young people not feel safe in those areas. Also feeling unsafe on school transport. So in some schools, there were certain changes that had been made to school transport, so getting into school and getting home. So they went from like a private company to then using public transport, and that had quite a big impact on those young people. Not feeling safe around the police. We heard a lot of that. And then also feeling judged by shop owners and in towns, knowing that there was only like a limit on how many young people could enter and shop, and once they were in that shop, the feeling that they were being watched and judged while in there. So once we'd kind of gathered all of that information, the team came together and we went through what the key themes were and what we could do about each of them. So we then discussed them all in detail and grouped them into 3 main groups. So these were the 3 main themes that we were hearing a lot about. So I'm going to pass over to Hannah, who is going to go through them with you.
On mute, Hannah.
Sorry. So the first one was the CCTV and lighting in specific areas, which was fed back to the board and the council safeguarding team, so Becca, and there were some changes there. And so the other one was the feeling unsafe on the bus from school. That was fed back to Cumes Head. And I think it was then put back into a private bus service. And with these two, whenever we've gone into our focus group in Cumes Head, we've checked in on these issues, and it seems to have like dissipated their feelings of unsafety around these areas. And then the topic that we focused on was not feeling safe around police. And that's where we've done 4 workshops within Cumes Head. We have 12 year 9 students. So we did 4 workshops. We started off just like briefing them and hearing like their general ideas and experiences. And then we based one of the workshops on how they would like approach conversations with police, as in if we brought them into the classroom, and like how they would go about talking to them. And they were all so articulate and really like aware of how they should present themselves. So we didn't really have to like touch on that much. And then we did some mind maps on police training and like the ideal police officer, which led into creating some questions of what they would like to discuss with a police officer. And we had Becca and a police officer come into the 3rd session. And that was a really, really like impactful discussion. I think on both sides, the young people again were really articulate, had some really great questions, and weren't like defensive or anything. It was very like really wanting to understand each other's point of view, and a really good like take away from that was the young people understanding that sometimes they were perceiving how they were being viewed in like maybe the wrong way. So they needed to understand what like a police officer's role actually was, which was to keep them safe, not to like judge them or try and incriminate them. It was just working on how they also are internalizing police perceptions and sort of working through their stereotypes of police as well. So it was really good, like seeing both sides of the situation there. And then we did like a wrap-up session after that, and got the young people's feedback on how they thought that went, and it was all really positive. We now have like 2 dates set for October to go in and go with the same group and plan and record a video, like a training video for police. And so yeah, the young people are really excited about that, and we're really excited to do that with them. So yeah, that's what's coming next with that. So next slide please. And overall feedback was that they felt heard and considered. They were making a difference, not just for them, but for everybody, like all the young people. And one of the things we're going to work on is making the workshops more interactive, which hopefully the next ones will be.
Perfect. I'm going to hand back to Duncan now.
Can everyone see the Miro board again? Is that all back?
Yep.
Fantastic. Okay. So, there we go.
So this was an exercise about safe places in young people's community. We did this across Newton Abbot and Teignmouth, but the one you can see on screen is Teignmouth. A lot of people, young people in fact, have identified that they don't have a lot of safe areas around Teignmouth. A lot around lighting, they don't feel safe in those places because it's dark. Pavements not being a thing, so they feel unsafe near roads and in the community, and just feeling unsafe in their whole community. So they also identified that a lot of the provisions they had around in the community didn't fit them, and they felt like that when they were a part of things, they didn't quite feel safe in buildings, or felt like the behaviour they were giving across was getting them in a lot of trouble, and they didn't feel like they had a space that was safe and for them where they could go and see their friends and enjoy themselves. Can I have the next slide, please, Duncan? So taking this from what young people have said, there was a survey put around the school. It hit 170 young people in a various age range, and 80% of those people within school identified that they would like a place for them that was safe within their community. This being said, this kind of took us to make a focus group with a selected group in Teignmouth School, where myself and Maddie have worked to use young people's opinions and their ideas to create what they could class as a safe space for them, where they feel welcome, they feel safe, they feel like they can come with their friends and not be judged. And we got a lot of opinions from young people about how they would like it to be. They want it to be approachable for everyone and accessible for everyone, and just have a place of their own. And we got a lot of very good opinions from loads of young people, so it was amazing to see. And next slide, please, Duncan.
So we took that focus group that kind of came from the research about the safe space, and it's continued to grow with a fantastic group of young people who are absolutely eager to be involved in all the conversations regarding building what a youth club would look like for them. They've been involved in designing everything from what they want to be accessible to them to what they want activity wise, having that interaction with youth workers to be able to get support and guidance outside of schools. And each week they come in and they're just desperate for this to be built. And they're an awesome group. Each week they inspire us. They bring all their own ideas. They've brought things that we haven't even suggested, just to continue to make the safe space inclusive for everyone who comes. Theme nights, movie nights, and really what they're eager to have is to have it open as long as possible, which obviously is not continually feasible, but what they put forward to us was from after school all the way till 11 p.m. at night. So they're absolutely desperate for a space that's for them. They've been able to reflect about what the survey has said. So everything that's been said in the survey, these group of young people have been able to reflect. And the group that we have is a hard to reach group of young people, which have been identified as part of the community as being around. And so being able to create this space that's for them going forward is fantastic. Next slide, please. So we've had some really fantastic things come out of it, including the survey. The map that was created has been able to be used by Teignmouth police officers as they patrol the route for the unsafe areas. All these voices are what's been able to put us through into the focus group, and it does continue to grow. And they're so excited to have a space that's built just for them, about what has been missing in the community for them. Going forward, we're going to continue with the focus of what they want inside a youth club and how that might build. We're going to continue to match the aims of that safe space for what the young people want to access to. We're looking at ideas from the focus group about how to engage the community in backing their want of the youth club, and then build that relationship with the community and young people. And also really eager to empower these young people to deliver and draw more research from other young people in the area, and creating peer researchers out of them, so we can just continue to gather information about what's missing in their community. Okay, next slide, please.
So just to recap under that question of how do we make our community safer for young people at its heart. So just to kind of pull out some of the practical steps under that question. So as well as what Brandon and Maddie have been talking to you about in terms of flexible use space for young people in Teignmouth, the real kind of practical things that we heard around changes to CCTV and lighting, those feelings of unsafety on the school buses, this relationships with the police and wanting more safety within that, and also a specific bit of feedback we heard that Steph is going to talk a little bit more about later as well, about some toilet doors in a railway station, toilet near a railway station that was really not feeling fit for purpose and making young people feel unsafe. So these are some of the specific things that we heard and some of the actions that we took and what happened as a result of hearing that and the spaces that were created. All of this was fed back through our board, as I mentioned, which is a space where we kind of lead with young people and the partnership, and feeding that back to the board, having some physical changes to where the CCTV were, having conversations with the school, this developing of this new training, and also about those toilet doors, specifically feeding that back and there being some changes made to those doors so that it helped young people feel safer using that facility. So really, really important that also these generated within that feedback loop, so passing this back to the young people and really just strengthening our relationships in terms of that genuine listening and building the change and kind of movement together of listening to what they say and making things safer for them and making changes within their community. So next slide, please, Duncan. The next big question for us within this project has been, how do we reduce harm and violence based on gender? So I'm going to pass over to Steph. Next slide, please, Duncan, so she can talk a bit about this.
Thank you. Okay, so as part of the project, our Spaces Education Support Service have been delivering 6 weeks programmes around harmful sexual behaviour. They've delivered these and offered these to all high schools in Teignbridge. And over the course of the time, I've worked with over 70 individual young people from 13 to 16 years old. Mostly young women, but there have also been groups of young men going through the programme. The makeup of the programme is really important in terms of fitting into reducing harm. So through the 6 weeks, each session has its own theme. The first is an introductory week, and that is around making young people feel safe, creating that space that they can open up and talk about their fears, their hopes, and the pressures they feel under. And then we move into healthy and unhealthy relationships. We often assume that young people already just innately have knowledge around what's healthy and what's unhealthy, but often we haven't given them the skills or the context or the expectations that help them to build safe relationships throughout adolescence and into adulthood. So this week is very much focused on that level of expectation that young people need to have of any of their relationships, be it romantic relationships or peer relationships or family relationships. Then we move on to look at pornography and safe social media. So all of the evidence tells us that young people are introduced to pornography at around the age of 10 or 11. Often that's involuntary, so they've received a message in their inbox, they've had a viral pop-up. So that is young people's introduction to sexual education. It begins to skew their expectations, both on themselves and on others. And then they become really vulnerable to either perpetrating harmful sexual behavior or being a victim of harmful sexual behavior. So that session is really important in reassuring young people and helping young people to understand what is realistic, what is normal, for want of a better word, and what they're being exposed to that can be harmful. Then we move on to doing a session around violence and abuse in relationships. Often victims of violence and abuse don't really understand that they're victims of violence and abuse. So this is an opportunity, again, to set normalized expectations, to give young people a voice to speak out and to begin to show young people again what their expectations could and should be of the relationships that they're involved in. We then look at consent and balance of power, really important aspect of their relationships as they go through adolescence. It touches on coerciveness and having a voice and being able to say no, and resisting, building resilience to pressure, which is really important. And that all gets rounded off with a session around where young people can access support. And around, you know, trusting their gut and speaking out, and it all builds into a set of workshops that are built to empower young people to insist on helpful relationships in their lives and powerful relationships in their lives that they are an equal part of. And it's proven to be a really popular and important aspect of this project. Next slide, please, Duncan. So during the introduction of this 6-week programme, the team that delivered it did a brief survey of the young people, and then they repeated that survey during the 6th week, once young people had undergone a lot of understanding and learning. And I just wanted to point out some of the outcomes here. So you'll see that there are changes between the first and the second outcomes. Exactly the same question. The difference is young people are more informed by this point. So by the end of it, we're looking at 79% of the 50 young people that undertook this survey had been subjected to catcalling. 81% had been subjected to unwanted sexual comments. 95% had received inappropriate images online. 68% had been subjected to unwanted physical touch. 52% had been subjected to flashing or exposure of genitals, and 69% had been subjected to controlling behaviour. That I think is a group of really scary statistics. We're talking about 13 to 16-year-olds, and I think it puts into perspective the kind of pressure young people feel that they're under. So the main purpose of this series of workshops is to ensure that young people are informed and educated, and in that way we begin to challenge the normalization of harmful sexual behavior, because when harmful sexual behavior is normalized, it becomes even more harmful, and young people grow into adults who believe that that is just the behavior that they are expected to receive, which is unhelpful and harmful for everyone involved. Next slide, please, Duncan. So one of the successful outcomes of these workshops, aside from the learning, as Emily pointed to earlier, was around young people brought up how unsafe they felt around the toilets near the train station. They had brought up that the toilet doors were really, the bottom of them were really high, and that they had been subjected to people taking photographs under the stalls. As a result of the partnership, we were able to bring that back here. The town council were able to really quickly change the doors. Just add on an extra amount to the doors, which made young people feel safe. And a couple of the comments there, I'm glad they've listened to us. It makes me think that they might do more in the future. I feel safe there now. I can't believe that people have taken us seriously as teenagers and as we're classed as troublemakers. I don't think we should underestimate the power that following through on young people telling us they feel unsafe, but following through with actions that make them feel safe can have on them as individuals and as groups. And young people who feel safer then become embedded in a safer community. And I think that's a really important takeaway from this. Next slide, please, Duncan.
Thank you, Steph. So as part of this theme within the project, we had another quite specific question, which was, how do we change the culture of misogyny? And this was, the specific activities around this were really creating some space to talk to young people about how do they think that we can change the culture of misogyny, and really being led by them in terms of the change that they want to see. So we spoke to almost 180 young people, and also some experts by training and some professionals. Some of you who might be here today, I'm really glad you can come and listen to some of the results of this. So we did one-to-one interviews, we did group work, we did big events where young people just showered down their ideas on big bits of paper. And here on this slide are some of the quotes and some of the top insights that we gleaned from that process. So one of the early ones that came from some of the women-only spaces that we created was a really kind of strong message around, why do we always have to find the solutions? And the kind of insight that we pulled from behind that was that young women really feel like they've been given the role of keeping themselves safe from the kind of harm and violence. When we spoke to young men, they talked about not really understanding misogyny, maybe understanding it, but not quite seeing it within their local community, or being unable to know it or what to do differently. We also heard a really strong message from all the young people that everybody is impacted by this, everybody is impacted. And actually a real kind of quote with that was, we need an opportunity for people to take off the mask and just have really kind of honest and raw conversations together in that space, without shame, without blame, coming together as people on this topic. We heard some quite practical things from young people in terms of these conversations need to be done earlier and before this starts to be seen and addressed, and actually really needing some interventions that were earlier, and that the interventions at the moment being really kind of focused at that kind of higher tier level. Young people told us they really wanted to be part of the process, they wanted to feel trusted, they wanted to feel empowered, they didn't just want a teacher telling them what to do, and yeah, really just wanted those opportunities to understand it in reality from real voices and have some practical conversations about what to do instead. So from this stage, we went then forward to think about, okay, so what are the goals? So we've heard these insights, we've listened to these quotes, lots of young people, lots of experts in terms of experience and training. So what did that turn into in terms of action? So next steps, next slide, please, Duncan. Thank you. So these goals here, so that's what we took from those insights. Okay, so if we were going to design something that was going to make a difference in this culture of misogyny across these places that we're working on for these communities that we're talking to, so they would needing to be something that really focuses on boys, with an opportunity for everyone to get involved. That the space would be deeply reflective, based on strengths, and about relationships and building safe and trust over time. Young people were really talking about wanting learning questions and opportunities to talk about it themselves and kind of pull that together and come up with their own solutions, and really having an opportunity to explore things from different perspectives. So these were the goals that came out of all of that research and all of the conversations that we'd had with young people in these spaces. And if I just show you the next slide, Duncan. This is really a process slide, so I know that you might not be able to see all of the detail in this. Becca, as she said, is going to send this out to everybody so you can have a little bit more of a closer look. But this is some of the numbers in this slide in terms of the number of young people we spoke to, the experts, but also the kind of system and the kind of the innovation experts that we included in this process as well. That was really helpful in terms of shaping this design. It's co-design that we went through with young people. And what went from the goals into the bottom here, you can see the design recipe of tools. So we led some workshops with young people to design using those goals. Okay, so what could a project look like? What could something look like that was going to really meet this question of how do we change the culture of misogyny? And so from that, there was an idea around a group work program with boys, young men, early, maybe end of primary, maybe first year of secondary, and that was maybe about 8 sessions, and it was all based around voices. So a bit of a name in terms of voices to be heard, some ideas around different audio, video clips at the beginning of a session, and then some really open space for young people to come together and discuss and reflect with some curious questions that they would be given to that would help them through that process. A key thing about this service that young people were looking for was those spaces to be really flexible and creative and adapted to the context. So for it to be able to be a youth worker leading it, a teacher leading it, but also themselves leading that space, and perhaps in a second iteration for young people to be trained up as educators that would then lead that space themselves. for there to be some fun, some food, and those sort of things involved. That was really important as well. So giving you a bit of an idea, this is something that came out of that sort of process, was a programme called Voices to be Heard that would really be aimed at boys and young men, talking to them about gender roles, stereotypes, and then having some space to think about their own solutions and what they wanted to be different. Next slide, please. So what's next? What would we like to happen? So we've got some activities planned up until the end of March. We're still sort of beavering away. But in terms of what we'd like to do, what we'd love to continue doing, if I just take you on to the next slide to just frame that a little bit. Duncan, next slide, please. So I mentioned right at the beginning that we've been thinking about a vision, and this again was something that was co-created with young people and across the partnership. So we're thinking about together as a piece of work, trying to make change across this system, these places, really working towards this vision where young people feel safe in their community and heard with their peers. And thinking about Teignbridge and safer spaces, safer places as a road, as a path towards that. But really working towards that vision, these strong pillars underneath that of thinking about physical spaces. So we mentioned a couple of times about the environmental auditing we've been doing. A phase in the next part of work that we're going to be doing with the peer researchers is going to be focused on physical changes within environment. The relational interventions, the ones we've spoken to about here, the group work, the conversations. We've also been doing some targeted one-to-one work with young people as well. One of these pillars is around kind of we're doing it right here, is generating a movement, generating power and energy as a pillar towards this vision. We've been doing lots of presentations, speaking to people, all really passionate about involving people and creating kind of energy as we work along towards this vision together, all underpinned by this passion and intention. And I think what we're sharing with you today is these spaces we've created for young people to share with us their wonderful ideas, but also lead the work that we're doing as well as alongside and with us. I'm going to pass over to Duncan now, who's going to talk about some of the specifics within this. Next slide, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so really just how and if we could continue, what would it look like? And some of the kind of key areas that we've identified as being some of where we've noticed the successes, or we have developed some research that have led to us looking at, okay, what could it look like next? Very much about our investing in our peer researchers. We recognise that we've been involved in peer research now for a good number of years, from one project moving on into this one, and the benefit that it brings of having young people talking to young people, skilling those young people up so that they in terms of their own professional development, but actually giving an insight into solutions and thought processes that we probably quite often we miss. We might be kind of all professionals in our own industry, but as we get older, quite often the gap between us and young people gets bigger, and sometimes we miss some of those things that we think still exist, and actually for those young people it might not be relevant, and something else is really, really relevant. A really interesting point that I think that was a light bulb moment for me when we were talking on some feedback to the peer researchers about young people in Newton Abbot and why they walked a certain way. We're talking about sometimes that they, in the evenings and the nighttime economy, and the aspect of going, well, being catcalled because they're walking past large groups of men in kind of the nighttime areas where the pubs are, and thinking, well, why don't you go a different way? Well, the aspect going, well, actually, that is the least worst route to take, because actually the other way is complete darkness and you're on your own and we don't know what's around the corner. Another route is that actually there are some more kind of aggressive and violent individuals that they know hang out in a different area. So actually their recognition of going, okay, we'll put up with the catcalling because actually it's still a crowded area and we feel safer that way than walking in a different direction. But those sort of things sometimes can get missed, and recognizing that our peer researchers play a vital role in being able to tease out some of that information. So that's one of them. We're looking at our peer educators training and opportunities for young people to continue to lead the design, again, from the ground up. Young people, and I think what Steph mentioned there is really vital, isn't it? Because we know that we're almost in when we look at society, and democracy is under attack in certain aspects globally, and sometimes within our own country. So with our next generation of young people, recognizing that actually when they bring something to the table and there is an opportunity for discussion, that action happens, then I think that feeds into the recognition that democracy and being listened to and being kind of heard has an impact, and actually that reinforces and kind of helps them in their development, their growing up, really recognizing the role of the community and society plays. The police training would be something that we really want to kind of move forward with. I think the young people are really excited. Their experience when Becca and the police officer went in and really understanding sometimes that they're the young people's perception of police officers, but the police officers recognizing how they may be perceived, and really the bringing together of those two sides to bring a greater understanding. And I think having the young people being able to help influence and give some of their input into training for police, I think can only be a good thing. And I think that helps to kind of bring down some of those barriers. I think there was a really useful thing that Becca mentioned to us again about different police officers have different roles, and therefore there's different specialisms and different trainings and different personality traits. And actually for the young people to be aware of that, just because they're wearing a police uniform, it isn't always in the same role within the community, and those sort of things really help to develop some of those feelings of feeling safer and actually more willing to approach police officers in community settings.
I just wanted to add there, Duncan, is that okay? From our meeting in the school with Becca and the police officer, they both, Becca and Joe, the police officer, were like so pivotal in changing the narrative for young people. So I just wanted to thank them, like specifically for taking their time out, because we couldn't have done it without them, basically.
No, absolutely, and I think you're right, isn't it? Bringing them into the same environment, that's what makes a huge difference. And then feeding on from that, as Emily was talking, the voices to be heard, and how we want to really expand and develop that about how we can work with young men. There's some elements around, if we're going to change the culture of misogyny, we have to, in the first instance, be able to tackle the kind of pervasive nature of social media, particularly on young men and young boys, and that influence. And we are in a situation where we're not really able to control what comes from the other countries into the minds of our young people. So, and we know we can't necessarily turn it off, but what we can do is try and influence and support and give knowledge to those young men to be able to make the right decision to not look at stuff and to turn it off. There's a really interesting documentary on Panorama recently, Can I Live Without My Phone, which was really looking at teenage boys, particularly who are getting sent violent images or sexually explicit images. And even if they go to the networks and say, actually, I don't want to see this, the algorithm is still continuing to send it to them. So we know there's a huge issue where we are not really in control of those networks, and we're not in control of some of the things that get kind of presented to our young people. But at the moment, what we can do is try and skill our young people up to be able to make the right decisions. And also, it's something about when you change those young men's perceptions about it not being cool, and actually giving them the confidence and the knowledge to challenge their friends to be able to do that. And actually, rather than it being the funny guy who is able to do the catcalling and all of their friends laugh, is actually how do we change that conversation to actually them recognizing and all of their friends going, no mate, that's not cool, that's not what that you shouldn't be doing that. And so that's a really important thing. The more people we can more young men we can raise awareness with, the greater that the impact will be in changing some of that narrative amongst that kind of that peer group. And then finally, working to open and align our strategic planning for future funding, and recognizing that this isn't just us, but this is about how do we bring in the wider community, how do we bring in businesses, how do we bring in other statutory organizations, how do we bring in planning around how we think about the environment for young people as well. And I'll just hand you over to Becca to kind of round it off.
Okay, thanks. There's a couple of things that I just want to summarize from everything that I've heard and my experience on the project since June 2022, and something I really want to reiterate. The young people that you're hearing from through these peer researchers are not the young people we normally hear from. They are the hardest to reach young people. When they've gone into the schools and they've worked with the harmful sexual behaviour groups, the teachers have picked the children who will benefit from the most. They pick some of the most vulnerable, some of the most challenging. The group that I met when I went to Teignmouth were the group that don't normally stay in a classroom for more than about 5 minutes. They engaged and they were each chomping at the bit as to who was going to do the presentation to me. The inspiration and passion that I've heard from the young people has been in every group of young people that I've engaged with, as well as the peer researchers. So for me, one of the things that I'm so proud of this is really genuine voices from the people that we don't normally hear from. But that's not easy to get. And for me, that's the investment in relation to the time, the peer research approach, and because of that, that has given us the rich data that we've got that we wanted to share with you, which is why they've called this a learning event. And also, we know that schools teach consent. There isn't the space to discuss consent in the way that it's been discussed through these workshops. One of the things that was the biggest shock to the peer researchers that were in the schools was how little young people actually understood about consent. Ask them a definition of what consent is, they know what it is. How that applies to them in their reality, no. That needs a debate with somebody that they've developed rapport with and is trusted, and isn't a teacher, because that has a different dynamic to it. So trusted relationships has been a key throughout all of this in being able to get to the learning and get to the changes we've got, and also get to the co-design that the young people working alongside us have felt trusted. So our call to action, nothing in life's for free, including this session. One of the reasons we wanted you here and we wanted you here at this part in the project is we've only got 6 months left and we've got so much more we want to do. So one of the things that we want you to think about is any other funding opportunities that you're aware of, but also is there anything about our approach and anything our learning that you can implement in your work, or that you can support us in developing further. And the last thing for me, which we heard about peer researchers before we started this project. For me, the value of peer research has grown absolutely in my professional knowledge and my professional learning around the increased value of lived experience, young people talking to young people, and giving us that insight. So those are the 3 kind of takeaways that we wanted. Any other funding and any way that you think that we can continue some of this work, we're really happy to discuss with anybody the ideas of what we've got in the ways we want to go forward. And please use what you've heard, which has come directly from young people, to influence, advise and guide the work that you're independently doing. So I think unless there's anything anybody else from the team wants to add, we're going to open it up to questions now. Please feel free to give any comments or observation. But also, if there's any questions, I haven't noticed any questions in the chat that we haven't been able to answer. Hopefully that's because you've been so wrapped by the presentation and you've been taking it all in. But I'd just like to open it up to any questions. Have we shocked you all to silence? Oh, so go on, go ahead.
That's all right. Somebody give it 30 seconds. Somebody always breaks the silence, don't they?
Yeah, go for it, and then I'll go to the hands.
I mean, it's just an observation. Hey, thank you very much for the presentation and for all the work that you're all doing on this, because I think it's essential that we're going forward, and I think it's exceptional what you've been able to do with the funding that's been available up to now. As somebody of that really older generation who lives in, there's a lot you've talked about, which is reminiscent of what it was like even 60 years ago. But I think my generation kind of worked our way through that in blind ignorance, to be honest. Some of the things that are said now, and particularly the misogyny that you talk about, looking back, I'm still compos mentis enough to remember that some of the things we said then would be completely unacceptable now as they were then, but that was what we lived through. I do think the challenges for young people now are significantly more than they were when I was 15 years of age, because of the social media, because of the pressure. But I think the great opportunity and advantage of what you're doing is listening to them because I think our generation was that you should be seen and not heard. You know, move on, stiff upper lip, stop whinging, get on with it. And I think it's really important that we try to build on what you've already done.
Brilliant.
Going
Thank
forward
you.
next year. You know, so,
Thank
but thank
you.
you very much. It's really appreciated.
And I think, you know, one of the things that we're hearing is, and hopefully you've seen from the data we've presented, those things are still happening. Whilst there is more awareness, unfortunately, it is still happening, and there is still an awful lot of work to be done. But thank you for your comments. Liz, can I come to you, please?
Yeah, thank you very much. That's been a really good presentation. I'm really interested and curious. There's a couple of things I'm interested and curious about. One is, so for people that don't know me, I'm a strategic lead in domestic abuse, sexual violence and VOG for Devon County Council. So we commission primarily adult services, but we've been working for Young Devon, for example, on domestic abuse and children, young people. Really interested in understanding the profile of both the young people that you worked with, but the peer researchers as well, to understand a bit of the family background. So I think there's something there, not for today, but maybe a conversation to be had about us learning from that. We're refreshing. We got Becca on the call as well, I think. We're refreshing our needs assessment, and that link between children's and young people's behaviours and their family experiences and what precedes that is something, and then breaking that cycle is something that's quite important to us. So yeah, I'd like to understand a bit more about that. And also
on that bit first, Liz, we can connect you with the peer researchers that did that work. We have also got a much bigger rich intelligence source around the sorts of disclosures that were coming out and the sorts of experience. So as well as opinions and voices, we had experience that was shared because of the report. So what we can do is set up a meeting with you to have a much more detailed discussion around what that looked like
and what we could
and the
make
young
it look
people
like.
involved.
Yeah. Some journey mapping strikes comes to mind in terms of understanding those young people's journey and how they got where they got to, and what was happening to them. And the other thing is about the age. So you talked about, and I've heard this before, obviously you worked with a group 13 to 17, isn't it, you said? The age group. It's quite a big range. I've got a 14-year-old son, and I see some of the older kids, and it's like, in terms of maturity, it's a big range. And you also talked about them telling you to do things earlier and sooner, and it's like understanding what that means. You know, is it early at 17 for 13, or we talking about 13 saying you need to talk to us about this at 10, and what that looks like? I'd be interested in understanding more.
So we got some information on that. So things like the majority of girls had their first dick pic sent to them by the time they were in year 6. So talking in secondary schools is way too late. So again, in the detailed reports where we've got much more quotes and detailed and rich information that we can share with you, hopefully, again, that will give you some more insight. But that is founded on those sorts of things which are around experientially, when their views on this were starting to form around what was normalized, what's normal behavior, you know, and how do you deal with that at what age. So yeah, we've got all of that we can share with you.
That's great, thanks.
No worries. Thanks, Liz. Joe.
Hi, you know me, but I'm in the public health team working for Devon County Council, for those who don't know me. Echo everything everyone said about the presentation and the work. I'm most interested and excited in the 2 education programs, so the Healthy Relationships 6-week program that Space described, and also the Voice to Be Heard work with young men. So I guess from my perspective, trying to work out how could we look to extend that or roll it out or evaluate it. I guess my question is, what would the next step look like from your perspective? Like what needs to happen next? And is there potential in terms of capacity for it to be rolled out? Is it a simple case of funding, or is it more complicated than that?
So looking at the 2 projects separately, and colleagues on the team, please jump in if I'm stepping out of line here. First one, in relation to harmful sexual behaviour, Space have already bid into the Safer Devon Partnership, for some funding to try and expand that. We're really comfortable that we've tried it, we've tested it, and we've got the results that make us really comfortable with that. So it is around funding for extension around that, and for me it's around a continual rolling program and reflecting on trying to get in earlier, and if we were getting in earlier, how we would design that. In relation to the voices work with the boys, I think what would be really interesting would be to do some pilot work. Now, the way that that is designed is it can be delivered by different by a teacher, it could be by a peer researcher. So I think we probably need some pilot and some testing, which I don't think we have. Well, I'm right, Emily, aren't I? We don't have the capacity to deliver that within our existing funding. Within the 6 months, so we're at the point where we've got the program, but for us that would be piloting before looking at expanding. So can I just check with colleagues, are people happy with what I've said on those two?
Yes, I think in terms, yeah, absolutely, Becca. I think in terms of the harmful sexual behaviour workshops, Becca's right in that it needs to be a rolling programme, and that there needs to be an alternative that is much younger, that talks to much younger young people about actually how things make them feel and how they are able to react to that in to make their space safer. And it's, you know, it's scary, the age that young people are being exposed to harmful behaviors is scary. And I think what needs to come with that is equipping adults in young people's lives. I think it would be safe to say the reason that often these topics aren't brought up at a younger age is because the adults around children are uncomfortable bringing these things up at a younger age, not because people don't think it's necessary. So there needs to be some educative resource put in there, I think.
Sorry, Rebecca.
That was right. Just to quickly say that, you know, the strategy, young people are coming up with their own strategies of how to deal with this every single day. I've got a quote here. You have to scratch them to make sure you get their DNA under the nails. That's what young people are doing to live in our society. We just can't have that. And we need to work with young people around different strategies. The only way to do that is have those sort of meaningful conversations. Maddie, I'm so sorry. I will put myself on mute straight away.
No, that's okay. I was just going to, I know that the people who've designed the harmful sexual behavior have begun looking at how to make that program target an earlier age. I think it was originally put in at the 13 age because that is the age of consent legally, and so they can get more in depth about the laws and delivering the Doink C card system to them. They're able to access it from that 13 up, and so they've already, from the information that they've gathered over the schools that they've been visiting, have been able to look at how they can edit that program that they've already got into targeting a younger group. So I think if they could get funding, that would be something that they have begun thinking about because of what they've already delivered to the schools.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Is that okay, Joe? But again, we're really keen to have conversations. This is an opportunity for you to hear the kind of headlines. We're really really happy to facilitate further conversations outside of these with the young people that have been organising those sessions.
Okay, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rick.
Yes, thanks. I look after a charity that, amongst other things, provides a play park in Yelverton, and obviously, being a play park, lots of children use it, but the older children tend to use it as a sort of informal meeting place. So it's usually got children of all ages in it. I wondered if there's any literature or signposting we could put in the play park to connect anyone that's concerned or needs advice or needs help with the sort of work that's going on.
Can I come to my colleagues in Space and Young Devon to answer that one, please? Go for it, Steph.
Yeah, sorry, I was just thinking how best to frame it. For me, I don't think it's about literature. I think it's about people. I think young people need, it's totally appropriate that they hang out in public spaces. Of course it is, they're their spaces as well. But I think young people need more accessibility to informed adults, appropriate informed adults, to have conversations with I think signposting and posters as an ad hoc thing are great, but young people are more likely to seek help through relationships. But there
Okay,
are
so
lots of resources. We can point you in the direction of posters for sure.
but it's really just a question of whether you think putting a poster up or some sort of messaging would be useful. That's all.
It is useful on an ad hoc basis for sure.
Okay.
Joe, you wanted to respond to that, didn't you?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think there might be something about how we equip those adults, because I totally agree with what you're saying, that it's the relationship with the adults that are key, but the adults do need to be able to source information themselves. And I guess there's a question there about what training is available for the wider workforce around these issues, because I think that's something we could all be doing and accessing. And I know we have got some training that's available that Liz can talk to, or Paula's on the call, in terms of domestic abuse. And some of that includes some of this sexual harm stuff as well. But I think there's a question mark around how are we supporting the adults who are supporting the young people to make sure they're as articulate as they can be around these issues as well, so that we're not relying on space or those workers. Does that make sense? I hope that made sense. And I've also put a link in the chat.
That made sense. Thank you. Becca.
Hi, yeah, again, echoing great presentation and really good work. Just to come back to that point on harmful sexual behaviour in schools and the work that Space are doing, essentially, I was wondering if there was kind of any plans to roll that out to a wider cohort. We kind of know and we've established that harmful sexual behaviour and misogyny has been linked to serious sexual violence, serious violence, terrorism, but I'm just wondering if we can kind of get prevalence estimates in a wider cohort, not only to maybe determine kind of how young and where to best target the initial intervention, but also to kind of give evidence to support kind of more work in the area.
I think that would be fab. I don't think we have the capacity to do that within the initial funding. I think we can have a look at it and have conversations, and key conversations there are with the schools themselves. Like I went back to, there are smallish groups that are targeted and identified by the schools. So yes, we're doing 13 to 16, but we're actually doing very few young people within those schools, but we're trying to do the ones where we will have the biggest impact, which again goes back to trying to have more of a universal offer to be properly preventative. I don't want to be working with young people that have already experienced significant trauma, that carry shame with it, and all of those different things which will affect those young people. I'm desperate for us to do this a lot younger, but what these young people are doing is giving us that insight. So I 100% agree, Becca, but I don't think, again, it's one of the things that unfortunately we haven't got the capacity to have within this, but we can set up conversations with the schools. We've had really good engagement with our schools in facilitating our access to young people over some of this stuff, and that's something that we could definitely set up because those relationships are there. So again, happy to talk to you outside about how we could do that. Liz.
There's something to me about this that I can't, it doesn't sit right. It's fabulous what you're doing, but there's something to me about going back on what Joe touched on, is how do we work with parents, adults in people's world and enable them. So we often talk about schools. Schools have a big job to do anyway, and there's lots of pressures and lots of demand on schools to facilitate this work. And we often take this kind of professional view of, and not that I'm saying you guys do in general, I'm talking about, kind of equipping certain professionals, but actually something to me about how do we work with parents, and it goes back to that behavior, kind of intergenerational cycle of behavior. So enabling parents, like you said, somebody said, they're awkward conversations, not only to have, but to respond to. Going back on what David said, yeah, we experienced this 20, 30, 40 years ago, but my experience as a parent of teenagers now is that the experiences are very different. The language is very different. It feels a lot cruder. Certainly my children talk about stuff in a very different way to what I was exposed to as a young person. So, I've been flawed, and I work in this sector. I've been flawed by some of the comments and conversations that we've had. So there's something to me about, obviously you do Let's Talk, which is brilliant, but, how do we expand that, and how do we use the system to do that? I commission domestic abuse services. We work primarily with we work with the whole family, but it's the adults that comes, the victim that comes into contact with the service and does the harm. So to me, it's about how do we find that hook? And I'd be interested in further conversations about that. They're beyond school and education, absolutely good place, but there's family in this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just, while you're talking, just opening up, because we literally sent out yesterday our first 3-month evaluation follow-up survey from Let's Talk after the send. And I was really, one of the things that I found really interesting is the demographics of people that have responded to that survey. So we've had 18 people that have come back. We did send it out yesterday. And of the ones that have come back, 9, so half of them have been in the 36 to 45-year-old category, which I guess we probably might have expected. But we've also had 4 in 46 to 55, and we've had 4 in the over 55s. So we knew that through Let's Talk, we were actually engaging with a lot of grandparents as well as parents. So I mean, obviously I'm going to do a shameless plug for Let's Talk on being part of that solution. And one of the things that we found with Let's Talk is that some of our sessions, about 20% of the people that have joined as professionals, not parents, which is not at all the intention of what we set out to do with Let's Talk. Nor are we going to shift Let's Talk to be about professionals than parents. But what it does do is it demonstrates a need, just like what we've seen through all of our work is young people want to be involved in this stuff. They want to design futures. What we're hearing is parents and professionals also want to be involved in this conversation because of that generational shift has been so significant. People's experience has to be updated all the time to make it relevant and current. Otherwise, we're not gonna make those shifts. Emily. Emily,
You're on mute, Emily.
Emily, I think you're still on mute. Emily's joining us from Hong Kong, so sometimes there are some issues. Emily's off mute. Go for it, Emily.
Oh, brilliant. Sorry, I think it was just the microphone issue. I guess I was just going to come back to that question, Liz. I guess with one of the things that we're sharing today, and the main approach is by asking, you know, the how question, the how do we make the difference, the how do we make the change, is this working, is this not working? I guess that's the main thing that one of the main things I guess my intention to share in our approach is by working with, by genuinely listening, by creating space, by putting system and structure into how we are led by the people that matter most and are most affected by the issues and want to make the change. We build that in to be led by them, and we create lots of very flexible space to work with them and asking those questions in a interesting, curious and engaging way, and really listening and feeding back to them what we've heard and what we're going to do about it, and sort of creating that movement. So I guess I just wanted to add that in terms of the how for me is by working with and talking to.
And I guess for me it's like, what are they telling us? What they're telling us about what they need, not just from the system, but from the family then around their communities, and you know, how do we respond to that effectively? You know, what do they need from their mum and dads, or you know, adults of influence in their lives?
Yeah, and I think some of that debate has been really, really helpful, because when you get the rich insights, they say, well, I won't talk to my mum about it because she'll take Snapchat off me. And yet they're being experienced to harm. So what do they want? What would that gap fill? And you know, we did and there was an in-depth survey done in one of the schools, and it was to the parents, and the question was, if your child had experienced harmful sexual behavior, would they talk to you? Something like 97% of parents said yes, they'd talk to me. Reality check, no, they're not going to talk. You know, so how do we create those trusted relationships in our communities? We can't continue to think schools are going to fix everything, because schools are there to educate, and they do have a role to play in safeguarding, absolutely. But this whole project is around community solutions, keeping young people at the heart of our community and celebrating that, but listening to them to help them find their own solutions. So any other questions or observations? Okay, I'm probably gonna wrap us up then. So a bit of a reminder that, like I said, I will be getting this recording onto my CSP YouTube. So I won't send out the notes until I've got that. So it will be about a week until I can get this edited and get it live up on our YouTube. If you want to know more, then please, it'd be great if the people who presented could just put their contact details in the chat so that everybody's got those. That would be really helpful. So obviously I want to do some thank yous. I want to do a massive thank you to Teignbridge Council for coming to us as a community safety partnership in the first place, and trusting in us and our partnerships to bring this piece of work together. I obviously want to do a massive thank you to all the people on the call who have presented today, and the others who aren't here to present but have been instrumental in bringing this piece of work. The schools and the other wider partners and stakeholders who have helped let us create this in their spaces. And I would like to do another massive thank you in advance, and for today, and in advance for those of you that have joined the call that might take our learning on or continue to work and engage with us. So thank you so much for your time. I really hope you found it valuable and interesting. As you can tell, we're all incredibly passionate about this. There will be more learning coming out over the next 6 months, but we didn't want to wait. We wanted to share with you as we went. So thank you very much for your time. Have a fantastic day and keep in touch with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and then there were 8. Well done, everybody.